It was a brisk Saturday morning, July 19th, 2025, and the early Hanoi sun glinted off the towering glass skyscrapers of Lê Thai To Street, casting long, angular shadows across the bustling thoroughfare. The city had long since stirred, its vibrant pulse quickening with the relentless rhythm of a major financial hub waking to a new day. A cacophony of sounds filled the air, the incessant honking of motorbikes, the low rumble of car engines, the melodic cries of street vendors hawking their wares, and the constant murmur of a million conversations, all weaving into an unceasing, almost overwhelming symphony of urban life. The air hung thick with the rich, inviting aroma of Vietnamese coffee wafting from roadside cafes, mingling with the sharper tang of exhaust fumes and the faint, earthy scent of the old quarter's ancient stones. Streams of impeccably dressed business professionals, their faces stern and focused, flowed past, phones pressed to their ears, their hurried steps a testament to the relentless march of deadlines. Tourists, eyes glued to their phone screens, navigated the crowded sidewalks, attempting to capture every fleeting moment of this vibrant, chaotic city. Delivery drivers, swift and silent as ghosts, weaved through the throngs, laden with bags of food and parcels, all part of an endless, urgent current where efficiency relentlessly trampled empathy. Amidst this relentless, hurried river of humanity, at a familiar spot near the entrance of a sleek modern office building, sat a man who, to all intents and purposes, was utterly invisible. This was Elias Thorne, a man in his late 50s or early 60s, a silent observer in a world that refused to acknowledge his presence. He wasn't the stereotypical aggressive panhandler, the kind who would shout or demand attention. Instead, he was quiet, weary, almost resigned to his fate. His clothes, though worn and patched in places, were surprisingly clean, meticulously cared for, a small testament to a dignity he clung to fiercely. His grizzled beard, though long, was neatly trimmed, and his eyes, set deep beneath a perpetually furrowed brow, held a profound sadness, yet also a flicker of something intelligent and keenly observant. In his hands, he held a simple, clean piece of cardboard, on which he had painstakingly scrawled in Vietnamese, "Just $1, please, God bless, odd." His voice, when he dared to speak, was barely a whisper, soft and almost apologetic. "Excuse me, just $1, please." Every single day, Elias occupied this same position. From the first hint of dawn until the city lights truly came alive. He knew the street's rhythms intimately, the ebb and flow of its human tide, and the myriad ways people employed to avoid his gaze. Most actively averted their eyes, quickened their pace, or feigned urgent phone calls. They were blurs in his periphery, unseeing, unhearing, unfeeling. He was a phantom amidst a vibrant metropolis, a dark spot in a colorful tableau of prosperity. He had experienced this countless times, thousands of fleeting moments of deliberate non-recognition, and each instance chipped away a tiny piece of his remaining hope, leaving behind a gnawing sense of isolation. The profound loneliness that permeated his existence wasn't anger. It was a deep, aching emptiness. He didn't rail against the injustice. He simply existed, a quiet testament to the city's capacity for indifference. Before life had cast him onto the unforgiving streets, Elias Thorne had been a different man entirely. He was a gifted musician, a celebrated violinist and composer within Hanoi's vibrant underground music scene. He had performed in intimate, smoky cafes and exclusive private concerts, his music soaring and haunting, capable of touching the deepest chords of the human heart. He had known a quiet, profound happiness with his beloved wife, Lynn, and their cherished daughter, Mai, whose eyes sparkled with the same love for music that fueled his own soul. He remembered late nights spent composing, the gentle hum of Lynn's voice as she sang along to his melodies, Mai's tiny fingers attempting to pluck the strings of his cherished violin. But then, tragedy, swift and brutal, had struck. A horrific traffic accident, a reckless driver, a moment of careless fate, had stolen Lynn and Mai from him in an instant. The crushing weight of his grief was insurmountable. It shattered his will to live, extinguished his creative fire, and severed his ties to the world he had once known. He abandoned his promising career, walked away from his life savings, and forgot about the royalties from his compositions, which he had once considered secondary to his family's love. He sought anonymity, a profound escape from the agonizing pain of his memories, choosing to vanish into the bustling anonymity of the city, a place where he could be utterly lost, utterly alone. He believed deep down that people were inherently good, but the relentless pressures and frantic pace of modern life had made them forget the simple act of looking, of seeing. Tucked deep within the worn pocket of his tattered jacket, Elias always carried a small, precious memento, a small, tarnished, but exquisitely beautiful harmonica. It was an old, battered instrument, its silver plating dulled by time and countless touches, but its reeds still produced a pure, haunting tone. It was the very harmonica he used to play lullabies for Mai, its melodies weaving dreams of peace and happiness. It held within its worn metal the sweetest memories of his life, a tangible link to a past forever lost. Occasionally, when the night deepened and the street lights cast long, lonely shadows, when the city's cacophony had finally softened to a distant hum, he would secretly bring the harmonica to his lips. He'd play a short, haunting melody, a tune filled with profound sadness, yet also imbued with a fragile, unwavering hope. It was his unspoken lament, his private solace, a piece of his soul offered to the quiet night, a secret known only to him. Today, the encroaching evening chill was beginning to bite, and Elias's stomach gnawed with a familiar, aching emptiness. He had been sitting in his spot since 6 a.m., and now, as the late afternoon sun dipped below the skyscrapers, it was almost 5 p.m. Not a single jong had graced his outstretched hand. He desperately needed just $1, not for luxury, but for survival. A steaming cup of coffee to warm his chilled bones, or a small, cheap banh mi to quell the hunger that gnawed at his insides. This need was no longer a vague desire. It was a pressing, urgent necessity. The day was almost over, and his meager hope was flickering. He cleared his throat, a dry rasp, trying to make himself heard above the street noise. $1, please. A young woman, dressed in a crisp blue office shirt and gray pencil skirt, hurried past, her eyes fixed on her phone, her shoulder brushing his as she navigated the crowded sidewalk. She didn't even register his presence. He tried again, lifting his cardboard sign a fraction higher, his arm trembling slightly from the effort. "Excuse me, please." A group of boisterous university students, laughing loudly, strode by, their cheerful chatter drowning out his soft plea. They looked straight through him, as if he were made of air. Elias sighed, a deep, heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of countless forgotten days. He felt a profound weariness settle over him, and a familiar tendril of despair began to coil in his gut. Another day, almost gone, and he remained utterly invisible. The streetlights flickered on one by one, signaling the arrival of a long, cold night. His hope, as fragile as it was, seemed to dwindle with the fading light. He lowered his head, a silent, resigned figure, as the endless stream of humanity continued to flow past, not a single person turning back, not a single soul stopping. The relentless indifference of the city was a crushing weight, a constant reminder of his lonely existence and the profound, isolating silence that surrounded him. Ent of Metro City life continued its ceaseless flow around Elias Thorne. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the glass facades of the towering office buildings, painting the sky in hues of orange and deep purple, yet offering no warmth to the man who sat silently below. The sounds of rush-hour traffic intensified, a final, deafening crescendo before the city would grudgingly concede to the quietude of night. Elias huddled deeper into his worn jacket, the gnawing emptiness in his stomach now accompanied by a shiver that ran deep into his bones. He had given up on asking, his voice reduced to a silent prayer that no one heard. He simply existed, a testament to resilience, or perhaps to despair. Then, a subtle shift in the city's ceaseless current. Among the blur of faces, a different figure emerged. This was Alara Vance, a young professional in her mid-20s, an aspiring freelance graphic designer navigating the precarious early stages of her career. Her worn canvas tote bag, slung across her shoulder, was filled not with expensive gadgets, but with sketchbooks, a well-loved tablet, and a half-eaten granola bar. Her comfortable but slightly faded jeans and simple, unbranded jacket spoke of a modest income, a life still very much about making ends meet in an expensive city. She was on her way home after a particularly draining meeting with a demanding client. her mind a swirl of deadlines and design revisions. Fatigue etched faint lines around her soft, observant eyes, and a slight slump in her shoulders betrayed the weight of a long day. Yet, unlike the vast majority of passers-by, her spirit hadn't been entirely desensitized by the urban grind. Alara's steps, though tired, were not entirely unseeing. As she navigated the crowded sidewalk, her gaze, momentarily unfocused, inadvertently fell upon Elias. Unlike the quick, almost involuntary aversion of others, Alara's eyes lingered. She didn't immediately see a homeless man, she saw a human being. She noticed the quiet dignity in his posture, the carefully maintained cleanliness of his old clothes, the subtle tremor in his hand as he held the cardboard sign, and most importantly, the profound weariness in his eyes. There was no aggression, no demand, just a quiet, almost apologetic plea. Something about him differentiated him from the few aggressive panhandlers she sometimes encountered. He radiated a quiet, almost ethereal sadness that pierced through the noise of the city and tugged at a deep-seated empathy within her. An internal conflict flared within Alara. Her own wallet was thinner than usual this week, her energy levels depleted. The ingrained urban caution whispered in her ear, "Keep walking. Don't get involved. You have your own problems." She had been taught, implicitly and explicitly, to be wary of strangers on the street, to protect herself, to prioritize her own needs. But the profound sadness in Elias's eyes, the quiet desperation of his stance, resonated with a deeper part of her. It was a silent testament to a hidden pain that she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about $1. It was about acknowledging another human being's existence. It was her character moment, choosing to listen to the quiet urging of her conscience over the convenient indifference of the crowd. With a deep breath that was almost imperceptible to the bustling world around her, Alara made a decisive choice. She stopped. Her sudden halt created a momentary ripple in the relentless flow of pedestrians, a small island of stillness in a sea of motion. Ignoring the subtle jostling and the quick, impatient glances of those behind her, she reached into her worn tote bag. She didn't pull out $1. Her fingers closed around a crumpled 50,000 Vietnamese dong note, equivalent to a little over $2, perhaps a bit more than she could comfortably spare for a stranger. But then, an even stronger impulse took over. Her eyes scanned the street, landing on a small, unassuming convenience store across the road, its lights glowing invitingly. "Sir?" Alara's voice was soft, gentle, cutting through the din. Elias, who had been staring at the worn soles of his shoes, slowly lifted his head. His eyes, initially clouded with resignation, widened in disbelief. For a fleeting second he thought he had imagined it. Someone had stopped. Someone had spoken to him. Alara offered him a warm, genuine smile, a beacon of human connection in his isolating world. "Please, wait here for just a moment," she said, her voice reassuring. Before Elias could stammer a reply, she quickly crossed the street to the convenience store. Inside, she bypassed the flashy drinks and snacks, heading directly for the small, refrigerated section at the back. She emerged moments later, clutching a steaming hot cup of coffee and a warm, freshly baked banh mi, its crusty exterior promising warmth and sustenance. She returned to Elias's spot, extending the coffee and banh mi to him. Her gaze met his directly, without pity, only genuine compassion. "Here, sir," she said, her voice still gentle. "Please, take this. It's warm. I hope your evening is a little better now." Elias was stunned. This was more than money. It was an act of profound kindness, a gesture of recognition that transcended the transaction. His hands, trembling slightly, reached for the offerings. He looked at the steaming coffee, then at the fragrant banh mi, then back at Alara, his eyes welling up with unshed tears. For a moment he couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the raw emotion. It was a sensation he had almost forgotten, the warmth of human connection, the simple dignity of being seen. Thank you, miss," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. "God bless you. You don't know what this means. You really don't." He clutched the warm cup, feeling its heat seep into his cold fingers. A small ember of hope rekindled within him. He noticed her genuine smile, the warmth in her eyes, a stark contrast to the indifferent masks of others. As Alara began to turn, feeling a quiet satisfaction that stemmed purely from the act of giving, a flash of an idea sparked in Elias's mind, a deep, unbidden impulse. As she took her first step away, he instinctively reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers closed around the familiar, cool metal of his tarnished harmonica. He pulled it out, his hand shaking slightly, the worn instrument glinting dully in the dimming light. He didn't say anything. Instead, he brought the harmonica to his lips. A short, hauntingly beautiful melody, imbued with both melancholic longing and a fragile, enduring hope, filled the air. It was a tune of profound sadness, yet its intricate arpeggios and lyrical phrasing spoke of a master's touch, a composer's soul. It was a secret language, his unspoken thank you, a glimpse into his hidden talent, a piece of his very soul offered in raw, unadulterated gratitude. It was a melody he had composed long ago, for his daughter, a lullaby filled with dreams. Alara, already a few steps away, froze. The sudden, unexpected burst of music, so pure and poignant, cut through the city's roar. It was unlike anything she had ever heard on the street. She paused, her head tilting slightly, listening intently. The melody was strangely familiar, pulling at something deep within her. It was melancholic, yes, but also undeniably beautiful, carrying an emotional weight that defied its humble source. She turned her head, briefly catching Elias's gaze, seeing the profound, almost desperate sincerity in his eyes as he played. A flicker of surprise and appreciation crossed her face, a recognition of the unexpected talent. But the city was relentless, its pull strong. Distracted by the lingering fatigue of her day and the persistent urgency of the urban environment, Alara didn't linger. She offered Elias a small, acknowledging nod, a silent appreciation for the unexpected gift of music, but she didn't connect it to anything more significant. She kept walking, melting back into the crowd, her mind returning to her own daily struggles. She felt a quiet warmth, a satisfaction that her small act of kindness had brought a fleeting moment of peace to a stranger. She was completely unaware of the profound significance of that impromptu serenade, unaware that she had just been offered a glimpse into a life-altering secret, a melody that would soon echo through a much larger fortune. She left, feeling nothing more than the quiet joy of a compassionate heart, oblivious that her act of kindness had just set in motion a chain of events that would change not only Elias Thorne's life, but her own in ways she could not possibly imagine. The simple exchange, almost lost in the din of the city, was a tiny seed of destiny planted in the asphalt jungle. The days that followed Alara Vance's quiet act of kindness melted into weeks, then almost a month. Life, as it always does, resumed its demanding pace, pushing the memory of the weary homeless man and his haunting harmonica to the periphery of her thoughts. Alara was deep in the throes of a particularly challenging freelance project, designing a new brand identity for a rapidly expanding tech startup. It was a golden opportunity, but it demanded every ounce of her creativity and resilience. She spent countless hours hunched over her tablet, sketching, refining, and battling the omnipresent fear of client rejection. The pressure was immense, yet the prospect of this breakthrough, a tangible step forward in her precarious career, fueled her relentless work ethic. One sweltering afternoon, drained but exhilarated after finally submitting her design proposal, Alara sought refuge in a small, independent coffee shop, nestled in a quiet alley off Phan Chu Trinh Street. It was a place she often frequented for its strong Vietnamese coffee and its tranquil ambiance, a welcome respite from the city's ceaseless roar. She settled into a worn armchair, pulling out her sketchbook, intending to decompress with a few abstract doodles. Suddenly, a snippet of conversation from the table next to her, occupied by two well-dressed men in their late 50s, pierced through the background hum of the cafe. They spoke in hushed, somber tones, their words punctuated by the clinking of porcelain. Unbelievable, really, after all these years. To think Julian Thorne just vanished without a trace. A legend, gone. Alara's pencil paused mid-stroke. The name, Julian Thorne. It wasn't a name she recognized, not immediately. But the words legend and vanished without a trace caught her attention, resonating with a subconscious curiosity. She wasn't one to eavesdrop, but the intensity in the men's voices was captivating. "And his music," the second man added, his voice tinged with melancholy. "Still brings tears to my eyes. That haunting melody, the one from his Echoes of a Lost Soul album. No one has ever been able to replicate it truly. His unique style on the violin, the way he could weave such complex emotions with just a few notes on that old harmonica of his." The mention of the harmonica hit Alara like a jolt. Her heart gave a sudden, uncomfortable lurch. Harmonica. The connection was immediate, undeniable. The memory of Elias Thorne sitting on the pavement, his worn instrument producing that impossibly beautiful, melancholic melody, flooded her mind with vivid clarity. It was the same melody, the same haunting quality. She remembered how she had paused, momentarily captivated by its profound beauty, before the city had pulled her away. Could it be? The thought was absurd, fantastical. A world-renowned musician, a legend, reduced to begging on the streets of Hanoi? It defied all logic. She tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it away as a curious coincidence, a trick of memory. But the more she tried, the more the pieces refused to settle. The quiet dignity of Elias, the profound sadness in his eyes, the unmistakable skill in his impromptu serenade. It all pointed to something deeper, something far more complex than a simple act of charity. Later that evening, after her design proposals were safely submitted, Alara found herself unable to shake the unsettling sensation. The conversation at the cafe, the haunting melody, and Elias's face kept replaying in her mind. Driven by an uncharacteristic impulse, she sat down at her laptop and typed, "Julian Thorne musician disappeared," into a search engine. The results exploded onto her screen, a cascade of articles, old news reports, and fan forums. Julian Thorne, once a celebrated musical prodigy, a virtuoso violinist and a visionary composer, had indeed vanished over 2 decades ago. The articles spoke of his reclusive nature, his intense, almost obsessive dedication to his art, and the profound emotional depth of his compositions. He was particularly known for his unconventional use of the harmonica, incorporating its raw, soulful sound into classical and contemporary pieces, a fusion that had captivated critics and audiences alike. One old newspaper clipping detailed a major concert he had performed just months before his disappearance, showcasing his signature haunting melody, a piece described as Echoes of a Lost Soul. Alara's breath hitched in her throat. Echoes of a Lost Soul. That was it. That was the precise melody Elias had played. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked on an old black-and-white photo of Julian Thorne. The man in the picture was younger, cleaner, his hair neatly combed, but the eyes were unmistakable. They held the same intelligent depth, the same underlying melancholy that she had seen in Elias. The resemblance was uncanny, chilling. Further down the search results, she found forums dedicated to the mystery of Julian Thorne. Fans speculated wildly about his disappearance, a breakdown, a deliberate retreat, or even a kidnapping. One thread, however, caught her eye. Unclaimed royalties. Did Julian Thorne leave a fortune? It mentioned a persistent rumor about a vast sum of unclaimed royalties from his widely popular albums and potential investments that had quietly accumulated over decades, all left untouched since his disappearance. The rumor even suggested there might be an old, complex trust fund or a specific bank account that no one had been able to access without a key piece of information only Julian himself possessed. Alara felt a dizzying mix of disbelief and growing certainty. It seemed too fantastical to be real, yet the mounting evidence was overwhelming. Was Elias Thorne truly Julian Thorne, the lost musical genius? And was there an unclaimed fortune tied to his past? The thought wasn't driven by greed. It was driven by an overwhelming sense of cosmic injustice. A legend, living on the streets, while his legacy and his wealth lay forgotten. The next morning, the demanding client project, the deadlines, even her own financial anxieties, paled in comparison to the burning curiosity that consumed Alara. She felt a profound pull, a sense that destiny, or perhaps just a remarkable coincidence, had placed Elias Thorne squarely in her path. She needed to know. She needed to find him again, not to offer $1, but to understand the depths of his story. She had to verify this impossible truth. She spent the entire day consumed by her research. She delved deeper into Julian Thorne's past, seeking out interviews, old concert reviews, anything that might offer a more personal glimpse into his life. She found an old article mentioning his profound grief after the tragic death of his wife, Lynn, and his daughter, Mai, in a traffic accident more than 20 years ago. The description of his subsequent withdrawal from society, his inability to compose, and his eventual disappearance painted a picture of a man utterly broken by loss, choosing to vanish rather than face a world without his family. This detail, more than any other, resonated deeply with the profound sadness she had seen in Elias's eyes. It explained his quiet dignity, his resignation, his self-imposed anonymity. Alara also tried to find any mention of Elias Thorne in official records or any homeless shelters. Nothing. It seemed he truly was a ghost, deliberately untraceable. This strengthened her belief that he was, indeed, Julian, a man who wanted to be forgotten. As the afternoon waned, Alara prepared to return to Lei Tai to Street. She wasn't sure what she would say, or how she would even approach him with such an outlandish theory. What if she was wrong? What if it was all a cruel mistake? The possibility of a false accusation, of intruding on a stranger's pain, weighed heavily on her. Yet, the conviction that she had stumbled upon something truly significant, something that demanded to be acknowledged, overruled her hesitation. She had to try. She had to offer him the chance to reclaim not just a fortune, but perhaps a part of himself. She still saw Elias only as the quiet, kind homeless man who had touched her heart, but now a fragile, almost unbelievable possibility had begun to bloom, that this man was a key to a fortune, not just for him, but for a legacy of kindness. Alara Vance stood transfixed, the glowing text of Julian Thorne on her laptop screen mirroring the image of the weary homeless man she had helped just weeks prior. The air in her small Hanoi apartment felt suddenly thick, heavy with the weight of an astounding, almost unbelievable truth. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a tumultuous symphony of apprehension at the sheer magnitude of the discovery and an undeniable burning urgency. She couldn't simply allow a living legend to languish on the streets, a man who, by all rights, should have been celebrated, now battling daily for mere survival. The injustice of it all fueled her resolve. The following morning, Alara pushed aside her burgeoning freelance work, the demanding deadlines and creative pressures suddenly paling in comparison to the quest that now consumed her. Her sole mission was to find Elias again. Lei Tai. To Street, where she had first encountered him, now felt eerily familiar, yet impossibly vast. She walked slowly, her eyes meticulously scanning every street corner, every shadowed doorway, every face in the bustling crowd, a blend of familiar and unfamiliar countenances. The feeling of searching for a single homeless man amidst the teeming millions of a vibrant city was akin to finding a needle in a haystack, a futile endeavor that stretched her patience thin. Elias wasn't always in the exact same spot. Sometimes he'd relocate to a quieter alley, seeking respite from the oppressive urban din. A nervous knot tightened in her stomach, the fear that she wouldn't find him, that she had somehow already missed her chance to make a profound difference, gnawing at her. She crisscrossed the same blocks repeatedly, from the first hint of morning light until almost noon, her anxiety mounting with each passing minute. Every time a figure with a similar build or attire flitted through her peripheral vision, her heart would leap with a jolt of false hope, only to plummet with the disappointing realization that it wasn't Elias. Hanoi's summer heat began to intensify, beads of perspiration forming on Alara's brow. Frustration gnawed at her. She found herself questioning her own sanity. Was she overreacting, chasing a mere phantom of coincidence? Perhaps it was all just a cruel trick of her memory or an overactive imagination, weaving a fantastical narrative where none existed. But then, as she rounded a corner, passing a small, unassuming sugarcane juice stall at the edge of the street, where a few other homeless individuals often sought refuge from the midday sun, her gaze snagged on a familiar silhouette. There he was. Elias. He was sitting slumped against a wall, his eyes closed, seemingly dozing. His cardboard sign, "Just $1, please," lay face down beside him, a silent testament to his weary resignation. He looked even thinner, more profoundly exhausted than she remembered, the lines etched on his face deeper, telling a story of relentless struggle. A pang of profound sympathy shot through Alara's heart, eclipsing her earlier anxieties. She approached him slowly, deliberately, her footsteps light, careful not to startle him. She settled onto the pavement a respectful distance away, not too close to appear threatening, but near enough that he would clearly see her when he awoke. She didn't speak immediately, allowing her quiet presence to register. Then, gently, she placed a chilled bottle of water and a small box of sweet pastries into his lap. The faint, enticing aroma of the pastries wafted up, a subtle invitation that roused Elias from his uneasy slumber. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open, still hazy with sleep. When his gaze finally focused on Alara, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of recognition sparked in their depths. "You, kind lady," he murmured, his voice hoarse, barely audible. Alara offered him a warm, genuine smile, a beacon of human warmth in his isolating world. "Hello, Mr. Elias. You look tired. Please, have something to eat." Elias stared at the box of pastries and the water bottle. He hesitated, then slowly, with trembling hands, picked up the water bottle, taking a small, tentative sip. The coolness of the liquid was a small shock to his parched throat. He hadn't yet dared to open the pastry box. It had likely been an unimaginable length of time since he had received such a simple, thoughtful gift. "Mr. Elias," Alara began, her voice soft, cautious, carefully choosing her words. I heard something. It might sound crazy, but I wanted to ask you something. Were you once a musician? A musician named Julian Thorne?" The moment Elias heard that name, he flinched violently. His entire body stiffened, his eyes snapped wide open, filled with an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. His face drained of color, and he began to tremble uncontrollably. The water bottle slipped from his shaking fingers, rolling silently across the pavement. No, not me," he stammered, his voice a panicked whisper, laced with desperate denial. "You've got the wrong person. I'm just Elias, a homeless man." His raw, visceral reaction, so intense and uncharacteristic of his usual resignation, only served to confirm Alara's growing certainty. She knew then that she had inadvertently touched upon a deeply buried wound, a secret he had fought for decades to keep hidden. She gently placed her hand on his arm, her gaze filled with profound empathy, attempting to offer comfort rather than accusation. "Mr. Elias, please don't be afraid. I mean you no harm. I heard a melody. The melody you played that day. It was identical to a piece by Julian Thorne. Echoes of a Lost Soul. I looked him up, and I saw. You bear a striking resemblance to him." She continued, her voice gaining a quiet, earnest conviction. "I read about what happened to him. I read about his wife and daughter. I am so sorry. I want you to know that not everyone will judge you. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help. If you are Julian Thorne, you don't deserve this life. No one does." The mention of his wife, Lynn, and his daughter, Mai, shattered Elias's composure completely. The emotional walls he had painstakingly built around his heart over decades, layer by agonizing layer, finally crumbled. His eyes welled up with tears, and he began to sob uncontrollably, guttural, heart-wrenching sounds torn from the deepest recesses of his chest. This was the first time he had openly wept in years, perhaps even decades. The old, tarnished harmonica, his last tangible link to his past, slipped from his jacket pocket and clattered softly onto the ground. Alara gently picked up the harmonica, carefully wiping away a speck of dust, and placed it back into his trembling hand. She waited, offering only her silent, unwavering presence, allowing Elias to release the torrent of grief and suppressed emotion that he had carried alone for so long. She simply sat there, a quiet, steadfast anchor in his storm of pain. Finally, as his sobs gradually subsided into choked gasps, Elias took a deep, shuddering breath, struggling to regain some semblance of calm. He looked at Alara, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen, but the terror had begun to recede, replaced by a fragile flicker of trust. "You, kind lady," he repeated, as if those were the only words he could muster, his voice raspy from crying. Then, with a profound, weary sigh, Julian Thorne began to tell his story, a narrative buried beneath more than 2 decades of silence and self-imposed oblivion. "My real name is Julian Thorne," he said, his voice still hoarse, yet now imbued with a deep, resonating sorrow. "I was once a musician, a true musician. The violin was my life. Composing was my breath. I had a wonderful wife, Lynn, and my precious little girl, Mai. She loved my music more than anything in the world. I remember Mai often sitting on my lap, her tiny eyes sparkling as I played this harmonica for her every night before she fell asleep." He reached out, his hand gently caressing the worn instrument, a faint melancholic smile touching his lips. "The melody you heard, that was a lullaby I wrote just for her." He recounted the devastating accident, the fateful moment that had cruelly snatched everything from him. "It happened so fast. A truck lost control. I lost everything. Lynn, Mai, in one single moment." His voice cracked, his eyes staring blankly into the distance, as if replaying the horrific scene in his mind's eye. "My world crumbled. Music became pain. Every single note brought back their faces, their laughter, their absence. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't breathe. The beauty became agony." In his unimaginable agony, Julian had forsaken everything. He spoke of how he had left his apartment, severed all ties with the music world, abandoned a flourishing career that was on the cusp of international fame. "I no longer cared about money, the royalties, the investments. They were just meaningless numbers when I had lost the most important people in my life. I didn't want fame anymore. I just wanted to disappear, to cease to exist, to become a nobody." He explained that he had withdrawn what little cash he could, leaving the vast majority of his assets in dormant bank accounts and untouched royalty portfolios. He had briefly engaged an old, trusted lawyer to manage a small, anonymous trust fund for local homeless charities, with the sole condition that his identity never be revealed. "I told my lawyer I wanted to vanish. I wanted to live as if I never existed. My grief was my only companion." He then revealed a crucial detail: an old, seemingly forgotten bank account in Switzerland, where he had deposited a substantial portion of his international album royalties decades ago, an account he had completely erased from his memory for over 20 years. "Lynn used to say I should have an emergency fund overseas. I followed her advice. I never thought I'd need it. And then, I just forgot it existed, drowned in my sorrow." He also mentioned a few small properties he had bought in the quiet outskirts of Hanoi years ago, intended as secluded retreats for composing. He had never sold them, never managed them, simply walking away. "I assumed they'd been auctioned off by now, or that someone else had claimed them. I never bothered to check. They were irrelevant to my pain." Alara listened, each word Julian uttered a profound cut to her heart. She felt the raw, profound depth of his suffering, the irreplaceable loss that had driven a genius to the precipice of utter loneliness and self-imposed anonymity. His story not only explained Elias's invisibility, but painted a tragic portrait of Julian Thorne, the brilliant musician shattered by the deaths of his loved ones. "So, you have a massive fortune," Alara finally said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "An immense amount of money from those royalties and investments. They're still there, waiting for you." Julian looked at her, a faint melancholic smile touching his lips. "Money cannot bring Lynn and Mai back. I don't need it." He spoke, his voice tinged with bitter resignation. "They are just meaningless numbers. All I ever wanted was peace." Alara didn't argue. She understood that to him, material wealth was utterly secondary to his profound emotional void. She simply placed her hand over his, gently squeezing. "But it can give you a different kind of life, Julian. A life where you don't have to worry about your next meal or where you'll sleep. It can help you find peace in a different way." Her voice was firm, unwavering. "You don't deserve to live like this. You are an artist, a genius. You deserve a better life." Tears streamed down Elias Julian's face once more. But this time, they weren't solely tears of agony. There was a faint glimmer of light in his eyes, a fragile spark of hope. For the first time in over 20 years, someone was looking at him, not with indifference or pity, but with respect, with profound understanding. Ilara wasn't asking for anything. She simply wanted to help him. It was the purest form of kindness he had ever received. He looked at the harmonica in his hand, then at Ilara. A new thought, fragile yet powerful, began to form in his mind. Perhaps the vast fortune he had abandoned wasn't meaningless. Perhaps it could be used for good, for something positive, something to honor the memory of Lin and Mai, something to help others who were struggling in the shadows. Will you help me?" he asked, his voice quivering, a faint, desperate plea. Ilara nodded, without a moment of hesitation. "Yes, Mr. Julian. I will help you. I will do everything I can to help you reclaim what is rightfully yours, and I will make sure you never have to live like this again." She gently took his harmonica, carefully wiped it with the hem of her shirt, and placed it back into his hand, a symbolic gesture of promise. "We're going to bring you home, Mr. Julian." Julian looked at her, a weak but genuine smile gracing his lips. For the first time in 2 decades, he felt a genuine flicker of light in his life. Not the dazzling brilliance of fame or fortune, but the quiet, profound glow of human kindness and connection. A kind hand, a small act of empathy, had opened a door not just to a tragic past and an unimaginable fortune, but to a glimmer of hope for a future he had long thought impossible. The silent street, once a symbol of his despair, now held the promise of an unwritten chapter. The revelation of Julian Thorne's true identity and his tragic past had transformed Ilara Vance's world. What began as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a profound mission. The weight of his story, the magnitude of his loss, and the sheer injustice of his existence on the streets fueled her determination. She knew this wouldn't be easy. Reclaiming a forgotten fortune after 2 decades of self-imposed anonymity would be a labyrinthine task, fraught with legal complexities, bureaucratic hurdles, and emotional challenges. But looking into Julian's eyes, seeing that fragile flicker of hope she had rekindled, she knew she had to try. Their first step was to find a safe, temporary haven for Julian. Ilara couldn't simply leave him on the streets, especially now that she knew his true identity. Her own apartment was small, barely enough for herself, but she had a friend, a kind-hearted woman named Anne, who ran a modest guest house in a quieter, tree-lined district of Hanoi. Anne was known for her compassion and discretion. Ilara explained the bare minimum to Anne, that she had found an old acquaintance in dire straits and needed a quiet room for him for a few days, emphasizing the need for privacy. Anne, without asking too many questions, readily agreed, offering a small, clean room at a discounted rate. The journey to the guest house was a quiet one. Julian, still overwhelmed by the emotional outpouring of the previous day, walked beside Ilara, his head down, clutching the harmonica. He was a man adrift, slowly being pulled back to shore. Ilara bought him new, clean clothes, simple trousers, a plain shirt, and a pair of comfortable sandals. Seeing him shed his tattered garments and put on fresh attire was a small symbolic victory. He looked less like a phantom and more like a man, albeit one still haunted by shadows. Once settled in the guest house, Ilara began to map out their strategy. The immediate priorities were clear: secure his basic needs, establish his identity, and then, and only then, begin the arduous process of tracing his lost assets. She knew she couldn't do this alone. Legal expertise would be paramount. "Julian," Ilara began gently, sitting across from him in the small guest house room, a cup of warm tea between them. "We need a lawyer, someone trustworthy, who understands these kinds of cases. Someone who can help us navigate the legal system here in Vietnam, and potentially internationally, especially with that Swiss bank account." Julian nodded slowly. "My old lawyer, Mr. Pham. He was a good man, very discreet. He handled my affairs before I vanished." He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "He knew about the trust fund I set up for the homeless. He might still be practicing." Ilara's eyes lit up. This was a crucial lead. "Mr. Pham, do you remember his full name, or the name of his firm? Julian concentrated, his brow furrowed in thought. Pham Van Duke. His firm, I think it was Duke and Associates, near the old French Quarter. Ilara immediately pulled out her phone, searching for Pham Van Duke, lawyer, Hanoi. To her relief, a listing appeared. The firm was still active, though it seemed Mr. Duke himself might be semi-retired. She called the number, explaining briefly that she was calling on behalf of an old client who wished to reconnect regarding a sensitive matter. An appointment was set for the following morning. The meeting with Mr. Duke was tense, yet ultimately fruitful. Mr. Duke, a distinguished man with silver hair and keen eyes, initially looked at Julian with polite skepticism. He remembered Julian Thorne, of course, the famous musician who had vanished. He had handled the small, anonymous trust fund for the homeless, as instructed, never revealing the benefactor's identity. But to see him now, after all these years, looking so frail and aged, was a shock. Ilara, with Julian's permission, recounted the story, carefully omitting the more harrowing details of his life on the streets, focusing instead on his profound grief and subsequent withdrawal. She presented the old newspaper clippings, the forum discussions about the unclaimed fortune, and most importantly, Julian's own quiet, yet firm, assertion of his identity. Julian, for his part, answered Mr. Duke's probing questions with a quiet dignity, recounting details only the true Julian Thorne would know, specific dates, names of collaborators, obscure compositions, and the precise details of the Swiss bank account and the properties he had mentioned to Ilara. Mr. Duke listened, his skepticism slowly giving way to a dawning realization, then to a profound sense of awe and sadness. Julian, my dear Julian, he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought I would see you again. I am so deeply sorry for your loss and for what you have endured. He then turned to Ilara, his eyes filled with gratitude. Miss Vance, you have done something truly remarkable. This is a miracle. Mr. Duke confirmed the existence of the Swiss bank account, which he had only ever known as a vague, unconfirmed rumor from Julian's earlier instructions. He also confirmed that the properties Julian had mentioned were indeed still registered under his name, though they had fallen into disrepair and were likely occupied by squatters. He explained the complexities of reclaiming such assets, proving Julian's identity beyond a shadow of a doubt, dealing with international banking regulations, and potentially evicting occupants from the properties. It would be a long, arduous process, but it was possible. The Swiss account will be the most challenging, Mr. Duke explained. They are notoriously private. We will need your original identification, and likely a DNA test to confirm your identity, given the time that has passed. The properties here in Vietnam are simpler, but still require legal action to reclaim. Julian listened, his face a mixture of apprehension and a strange, almost detached acceptance. He still felt little connection to the money, but he trusted Ilara and Mr. Duke. He was simply following their lead, a man emerging from a long, dark tunnel. Over the next few weeks, Ilara and Mr. Duke meticulously worked on Julian's case. Ilara became his constant companion, his confidant, his bridge back to the world. She helped him obtain new identification documents, a process made easier by Mr. Duke's connections and Julian's ability to recall precise details of his past. She accompanied him to medical appointments, ensuring he received proper nutrition and care. She even helped him choose a new, more modern wardrobe, gently encouraging him to embrace a future beyond the tattered clothes of his past. The most challenging and emotionally draining part was the DNA test. It was a stark reminder of the passage of time, of the life he had lost. But Julian, with Ilara's quiet support, endured it. The results, when they finally came back, were conclusive. Julian Thorne was indeed Julian Thorne. With the identity confirmed, Mr. Duke began the formal process of contacting the Swiss bank. It was a slow, painstaking negotiation, involving reams of paperwork, secure video calls, and multiple layers of verification. The bank, true to its reputation, was cautious, but the irrefutable evidence, combined with Mr. Duke's persistent legal pressure, slowly began to yield results. The sheer size of the dormant account, untouched for decades, was staggering. The initial estimates were in the tens of millions of US dollars, having grown significantly through interest and smart investments made by the bank's automated systems over the years. Simultaneously, Mr. Duke initiated legal proceedings to reclaim Julian's properties in Hanoi. This proved to be less complicated but still required time and patience. The squatters, once confronted with legal documents and the undeniable proof of ownership, eventually vacated the premises. The properties, though dilapidated, held significant value due to their prime locations. Throughout this process, Alara noticed subtle but profound changes in Julian. The haunted look in his eyes began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of calm, even a faint spark of curiosity. He started to eat more, sleep better, and his frail frame slowly began to regain some strength. He still carried the weight of his grief, a permanent shadow, but it no longer consumed him entirely. He began to engage in conversations, asking Alara about her life, her dreams, her passion for design. He even started to hum melodies, softly, almost unconsciously, a sign that the music, though long dormant, was beginning to stir within him once more. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet park, waiting for an update from Mr. Duke, Julian looked at Alara, a genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time. "Alara," he said, his voice stronger than she had ever heard it. "You saved me. Not just my life, but my soul. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Alara shook her head, her own eyes welling up. "You don't owe me anything, Julian. Seeing you find peace, seeing you reclaim your life, that's all the repayment I need." But Julian had a different idea. "The money. It means nothing to me, not truly, not in the way Lin and Mai meant everything. But it can do good. I want to establish a foundation in their names, to help others who are lost, who are suffering, who need a second chance. And I want you to be a part of it, Alara. You have the vision, the compassion. You can help me make sure their legacy lives on, not just through my music, but through acts of kindness." Alara was stunned. A foundation. It was a magnificent idea, a way to transform immense personal tragedy into a beacon of hope for countless others. And for him to offer her a role, a partnership in this profound endeavor, was an honor beyond measure. "And," Julian continued, a mischievous glint in his eye, "I want to help you with your dreams too, Alara. Your design work, your passion. You have a gift. Let me help you nurture it. Consider it an investment in a very bright future." Alara laughed, a genuine joyful sound that echoed through the park. The road to reclamation was long, but it was no longer a solitary journey. It was a shared path, paved with kindness, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. The invisible man was finally beginning to see himself and the world anew. The haunting melodies of his past were slowly, tentatively, giving way to the harmonious promise of a future where his music and his legacy would finally find their true purpose. The initial thrill of discovering Julian Thorne's hidden identity and the vast fortune connected to him slowly gave way to the grinding reality of legal proceedings and bureaucratic battles. It was a testament to Alara's unwavering dedication and Mr. Duke's seasoned expertise that the process, though arduous, maintained a steady forward momentum. They faced skepticism from financial institutions, intricate legal maneuvers from long-lost relatives who suddenly appeared, sensing an opportunity, and the sheer inertia of systems designed to protect dormant wealth from frivolous claims. The Swiss bank, as Mr. Duke had warned, was a formidable fortress of privacy and protocol. Their initial responses were cautious, almost dismissive, citing stringent confidentiality laws and the sheer improbability of an account holder resurfacing after 2 decades. It required a relentless barrage of meticulously prepared documents, Julian's newly verified identification, the definitive DNA test results, sworn affidavits detailing his disappearance and reemergence, and countless historical records linking Julian Thorne, the celebrated musician, to the initial account opening. Mr. Duke, with his years of experience, knew precisely which buttons to push, which legal precedents to cite. He leveraged his network of international legal contacts engaging a respected Swiss firm to act as local counsel, ensuring every demand from the bank was met with precision and unwavering persistence. One particularly tense moment came during a secure video conference with a senior Swiss banking official, a stern-faced woman who questioned Julian directly, her voice devoid of emotion. She probed his memory, asking obscure details about the initial deposit, the exact date, the names of bank tellers he might have encountered. Julian, though initially nervous, surprised them all with his sharp recall, his musician's brain, accustomed to intricate patterns and details, retrieving fragments of information that no imposter could possibly have known. He even hummed a few notes of a specific jingle that had been playing in the bank lobby on the day he opened the account. A small, anachronistic detail that stunned the official into a moment of silence. This small human touch, combined with the irrefutable scientific proof, slowly chipped away at the bank's formidable wall of skepticism. After months of painstaking negotiations, late-night calls spanning time zones, and countless revisions of legal briefs, the breakthrough finally came. A crisp, formal email arrived from the Swiss bank. The account had been unfrozen. The funds, along with accumulated interest and investment gains over 2 decades, amounted to a staggering $47.3 million USD. The notification of the bank transfer, a series of zeros that seemed to stretch into infinity, flashed across Mr. Duck's screen. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood moment with champagne and cheering. It was a quiet, almost surreal acknowledgement of a profound shift in destiny. Julian, sitting beside Alara, simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his hand. The number meant little to him, not in the abstract. It was the newfound freedom, the peace it promised, that held significance. Concurrently, Mr. Duke's firm had been tirelessly working on reclaiming Julian's properties in Vietnam. These were 2 small, neglected plots of land with dilapidated structures on the outskirts of Hanoi, once intended as Julian's private creative retreats. They had indeed been occupied by squatters, struggling families who had nowhere else to go. Mr. Duke, with Alara's input, handled this with immense sensitivity. Instead of immediate eviction, they negotiated. Julian, through Alara, offered each family a reasonable sum to relocate, assisting them in finding new, safe housing. This compassionate approach, rather than a harsh legal battle, not only avoided negative publicity, but also reflected Julian's inherent kindness, now slowly re-emerging from beneath layers of grief. The properties once cleared, though in need of extensive renovation, were valued at an additional several million USD, further solidifying the fortune. Throughout this entire sprawling process, Alara observed Julian with a compassionate, discerning eye. The changes in him were subtle at first, almost imperceptible, then gradually more pronounced. The haunted, gaunt look that had defined his face for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet serenity. His eyes, once dulled by despair, now held a clearer, more present gaze, occasionally even twinkling with a fleeting hint of his old wit. He started to gain weight, his frail frame slowly regaining some much-needed strength. He exchanged his worn, threadbare clothes for new, comfortable attire that fit him properly, transforming his appearance from a figure of pity to one of quiet dignity. He didn't become a flashy millionaire, nor did he seek the limelight he had once enjoyed. His first splurge was a simple, yet profoundly meaningful one. He bought a comfortable, modest apartment in a quiet, leafy neighborhood near Westlake, a place with a small, sun-drenched balcony perfect for contemplation. He filled it not with expensive art or grand furniture, but with books, a comfortable armchair, and a new, pristine grand piano, a gleaming black instrument that sat silent for days before he dared to approach it. The music, long dormant, slowly began to stir within him. At first, he would only sit at the piano, his fingers hovering over the keys, hesitant. Then, he would play simple scales, exercises, almost relearning the instrument he had once mastered. Gradually, hesitancy gave way to exploration. He began to improvise, soft, tentative melodies that flowed from his soul, no longer burdened by the ghosts of his past. The mournful notes of his harmonica were now complemented by the rich, resonant tones of the piano. He found solace in the creation of new music, not as a performance, but as a private communion, a quiet act of healing. The profound sadness of his past remained, a permanent scar on his soul, but it no longer consumed him entirely. It transformed, becoming a wellspring of profound, empathetic creativity. He composed a quiet symphony of gratitude, a piece imbued with the newfound peace he was experiencing, a testament to the transformative power of human connection. Julian, true to his word and overwhelmed by gratitude, insisted on rewarding Alara handsomely for her tireless efforts. He didn't just offer a finder's fee. After much discussion with Mr. Duke, who suggested a generous yet ethical percentage given the immense work involved, Julian transferred a substantial sum to Alara's account, $5 million USD. It was an amount that far exceeded anything Alara had ever dreamed of. A life-altering sum that would allow her to pursue her deepest aspirations without the constant burden of financial struggle. Alara was stunned, overwhelmed by the sheer generosity. She tried to refuse, arguing that her reward was seeing Julian find peace. But Julian was adamant. "Alara," he had said, his voice firm, "you gave me back my life. This is not payment. It is a partnership. You are worthy of this, and I trust you to use it for good, just as I intend to use mine." With this newfound financial freedom, Alara's own path unfurled before her, vibrant and full of possibility. She didn't buy lavish luxuries. Instead, she invested wisely, set up a comfortable nest egg, and, true to her compassionate nature, began to pursue her dreams with renewed vigor. She finally had the capital and the freedom to open her own boutique graphic design studio, focusing on socially conscious projects for nonprofits and ethical businesses. She also dedicated a significant portion of her time and resources to establishing a new, innovative nonprofit organization in Hanoi, the Unseen Voices Project. This initiative was dedicated to empowering marginalized artists and homeless individuals by providing them with resources, mentorship, and platforms to express their creativity, ensuring that no talent, no voice, would ever be lost to the streets again. She hired a small team, passionate and empathetic, mirroring the spirit of her own actions. She wasn't ostentatious, but purposeful. Her small apartment remained her home, but her studio became a vibrant hub of creativity and social impact. The fortune for both Julian and Alara was not an end in itself, but a powerful catalyst. For Julian, it was the key to reclaiming his dignity, his art, and finding a new purpose in philanthropy. For Alara, it was the fuel for her passion, enabling her to amplify her compassion and extend her kindness to a wider community. The quiet, understated transformation in both their lives was a powerful testament to the unfolding fortune, not just in terms of wealth, but in the profound richness of a life touched by grace and driven by a shared vision of kindness. The once invisible man was now a beacon of quiet hope, and the young woman who saw him was building a legacy of change, one compassionate act at a time. 5 years had unfolded since that fateful encounter on Laythaita Street, transforming the bustling landscape of Hanoi, both physically and spiritually. The city's skyline continued its relentless upward reach, a testament to human ambition and progress. Yet amidst the ever-changing panorama of glass and steel, something far more profound had taken root and blossomed. A quiet yet powerful legacy of kindness, forged in the crucible of a forgotten tragedy. It was a legacy embodied by the enduring friendship of Julian Thorne and Alara Vance, and the ripple effect of compassion they set into motion. Julian Thorne, now a man in his early 60s, had found a profound, almost ethereal peace. He had shed the physical and emotional burdens of his years on the street, and though the deep sorrow of his past remained a part of his essence, it no longer consumed him. He lived a life of quiet dignity and renewed purpose in his sun-drenched apartment near West Lake. The grand piano, once a silent monument to his lost art, now resonated daily with his compositions. He didn't seek public acclaim, nor did he resume a performing career. Instead, he composed prolifically, his music imbued with a newfound depth, melodies that wove together threads of melancholic reflection, resilient hope, and profound gratitude. He often recorded these pieces privately, sharing them only with Alara or Mr. Duke, his music now a pure expression of his soul, untainted by the pressures of fame or fortune. He still played his old, tarnished harmonica from time to time, its raw, soulful notes a poignant reminder of his journey, a connection to the man he once was, and the kindness that had found him. The money, the millions, remained largely in trust, managed by Mr. Duke, funding the very purpose Julian now lived for. Ilara Vance, now a confident 30-year-old, had blossomed into a formidable force for social good. Her boutique graphic design studio, Canvas & Cause, thrived, known not just for its innovative aesthetics, but for its commitment to ethical client partnerships. She deliberately sought out nonprofits, struggling artists, and small sustainable businesses, ensuring her creative talents served a greater purpose. But it was the Unseen Voices Project, her nonprofit dedicated to empowering marginalized artists and homeless individuals, that truly became her life's calling. The foundation, generously funded by Julian, had grown exponentially. It ran multiple shelters that provided not just food and a bed, but also creative workshops, mentorship programs, and access to mental health services, recognizing the profound link between homelessness and deeper societal issues. The Unseen Voices Project had unearthed dozens of hidden talents. A former teacher who now taught creative writing to street youth, a gifted painter whose canvases now adorned local galleries, a shy, elderly man who discovered a latent talent for storytelling. Ilara was no longer just an aspiring artist. She was an architect of hope, building bridges for those forgotten by society. Their friendship remained the bedrock of their shared endeavors. Julian and Ilara met regularly, often for quiet meals at small, unassuming restaurants, or long walks by the lake. Their conversations spanned everything from Julian's latest compositions and Ilara's nonprofit initiatives to shared reflections on the profound human connection that had brought them together. Julian, reserved by nature, found in Ilara a kindred spirit, a compassionate listener who understood the nuances of his past and the quiet strength of his present. Ilara, in turn, drew inspiration from Julian's resilience and his unwavering faith in the power of kindness. She saw him not as a beneficiary, but as a wise mentor, his quiet wisdom grounding her boundless energy. He was the living embodiment of the transformative power of empathy, a constant reminder that true value lay not in wealth, but in humanity. True to his word, Julian had indeed established a major charitable foundation in the names of his beloved wife, Lynn, and daughter, Mai. The Lynn Mai Legacy Foundation. Operating largely anonymously through Mr. Duke and a carefully selected board, the foundation channeled millions of dollars into various causes close to Julian's heart. It significantly funded the Unseen Voices Project, allowing Ilara to expand its reach and impact across Hanoi. Beyond that, the Lynn Mai Foundation sponsored scholarships for aspiring young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds, provided long-term mental health support for individuals suffering from grief and trauma, and even quietly purchased and renovated dilapidated properties to create safe, affordable housing for vulnerable families. Julian rarely sought public recognition for these efforts, preferring to work through trusted channels, his motivations rooted in a deeply personal desire to transform his unbearable loss into a catalyst for positive change in the world. He often said, "This is Lynn and Mai's music now. It plays on in the lives we touch." Ilara, inspired by Julian's profound generosity and his commitment to silent philanthropy, continued to use her voice and her newfound influence to advocate for empathy and human connection. She published a series of children's books, beautifully illustrated with her own designs, that told heartwarming stories of kindness, resilience, and the hidden potential in every individual, drawing subtle inspiration from Julian's journey. She delivered keynote speeches at conferences, not about corporate profit, but about the ethical imperative of building inclusive societies and the transformative power of seeing the unseen. Her message was simple, yet profound. Every life has a story, and every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the power to create a ripple effect of monumental change. The city, once so indifferent, began to show subtle signs of transformation. It wasn't a seismic shift, but a gentle awakening. More individuals, perhaps influenced by the Unseen Voices Project, or simply by the growing awareness Ilara and Julian fostered, began to pause. They offered a kind word, a warm meal, a moment of acknowledgement to those on the streets. New community initiatives for the homeless, clearly the result of Julian's anonymous funding and Ilara's vocal advocacy, sprang up across Hanoi. The spirit of kindness, like a seed planted in concrete, was slowly, tentatively taking root, softening the hard edges of urban anonymity. On a crisp autumn evening, 5 years after their first meeting, Julian and Alara stood on the rooftop garden of the Unseen Voices Project, new flagship center, looking out over the sprawling, twinkling lights of Hanoi. The center, a beautifully renovated old building, was now a vibrant hub of artistic expression and community support. Downstairs, a group of young aspiring musicians, beneficiaries of the Lin Mai Foundation, practiced in a soundproof studio, their melodies floating softly upwards. Julian, his face serene, turned to Alara, a rare, profound smile gracing his lips. "You know, Alara," he began, his voice soft, almost a whisper against the gentle city breeze. "When you stopped that day, I was truly invisible. I was ready to disappear entirely. I thought my story was over." He gestured towards the vibrant city below. "But you saw me. You saw beyond the street, beyond the despair. And you, my dear friend, you brought me back to life. You helped me realize that even the deepest sorrow can be transformed, that there's always a new symphony to be composed." Alara smiled back, her eyes reflecting the city lights, the boundless human potential that was now her canvas. "And you, Julian," she replied, her voice filled with warmth. "You taught me that courage isn't just about facing danger, but about enduring unimaginable pain and still finding a way to give back. You taught me that the most beautiful music isn't always heard in concert halls, but sometimes in the quiet acts of kindness that echo across lives." She squeezed his arm gently. "You were the unseen hero, Julian. And now, your story, your music, your legacy of kindness is touching countless others." Together they stood, two figures silhouetted against the glowing city, the gentle architects of a burgeoning movement. Their journey, born from a humble request for $1 and an unexpected act of compassion, was a living testament to the truth that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path, even in the deepest darkness of misunderstanding and despair. The fortune, once a symbol of his abandonment, was now a powerful engine of change, proving that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in distribution, in the profound richness of human connection. The city, once a place of indifference, was now subtly imbued with the spirit of human connection, a place where hidden dignity could be found, and where every life held the potential for a miraculous, unforeseen fortune. The story of the Invisible Man and the young woman who saw him would continue to inspire, a timeless melody of hope in the heart of Hanoi. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining our journey.